So first of all, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining our session. In the next minutes, you'll hear how, why to use the UI5 Web Components. I'm Ilhan, and this is Martin. We are both working for 5 years in the UI5 controls teams in SAP Labs, Bulgaria. We actually joined together SAP, but the last year and a half, we are mostly contributing to the UI5 Web Components.
Hi everyone. We will go in depth in the UI5 Web Components in this session, so I hope it's not boring for you. First of all, I would like to throw back you through the years. How many of you were on the UI5con 2017? Okay. So back then, this guy, does someone recognize this guy? He's sitting behind. So this is Peter Music. He showed you that we are going in the direction of introducing more declarative renderers for our controls. It's not really visible as I took the screenshot from YouTube, but he's showing the renderer for a button. It has a button tag, a span, and some attributes. We evolved this idea, implementing different approaches, but in 2019 we are still using these declarative renderers for our handlebar, for our web components. Who was at the UI5con 2018 last year? Okay, back then we told you that we are working in the direction of web components and that UI5 will be available in our other different, in other programming models like React, Angular, Vue, and so on. So a year later, today, actually, we released the release candidate for the web components, and the idea evolved a lot of times. We completely started from the scratch the whole project, so I hope we have something out there and you test it and give your feedback. But what are the web components? You have probably been on some sessions we just started the day with. So we explained a bit the web components. I will again go back through them as some of you haven't seen this. Okay, web components are just a standard. It's standard for all of your browsers, and it contains several APIs integrated in your browsers. I will go quickly through them. The custom elements, the shadow DOM, ES6 imports, which actually just empower the web components in their packaging, and the template stack, which is helping and solving different performance issues in the browser, in the browsers, which occurred when you want to clone multiple nodes when you're binding big data and so on. I will quickly go through the first two. The custom elements API is quite simple. It lets you create a class which extends the HTML element, and that is like just an ancestor of the HTML element. HTML element is a class built in your browser, which is implemented in the div HTML element, span HTML, and so on and so on. All the elements you can place in your browser are HTML elements. So you can create now you can extend this HTML element class and create your own HTML elements. For example, this is a real example. We can just create a class which is called myComponent, and by calling this custom elements.define, we give a tag name which can be used in our page, and the class which corresponds to for this tag name. Also, we have the shadow DOM standard, which lets you render an HTML inside this tag we already defined. So you can like encapsulate styling, behavior, anything you need for your application and make it hidden from the end user. So that's what are we doing. If you saw the last presentation, we have just the UI5 button, but beneath there is much more. There are icons, there are some spans, text, and so on. So this is the API. It's quite simple. We can just call the touch shadow root and place some HTML with this shadow root. And actually, on the next slide, I have provided. This is the real example. If you write a simple code, like a simple snippet like the last one, you are getting this in the browser, the UI5 hello UI5con heading. But if you see in your Chrome inspector, you are getting this my component as a tag, and inside there is you can drill down the shadow root and check what is the actual DOM that is rendered. This is super powerful, as we can hide all the details for our components from the end user and just let them use the HTML tags. This API is nice, and it is supported in all major browsers. The Chrome, Firefox, and Safari have almost clearly no issues with the standard. Also, the new Edge we already give a try and tested, has no issues. At least we didn't find any. So yeah, we tested the beta fetch on Windows and Mac. The old Edge, which will be deprecated as much as I know, is still running, but with polyfills for custom elements and shadow DOM. This means that everything is working fine, but you wrote a little much more code than you do in the modern browsers. And we completely polyfill almost everything for IE11 and transpile all of our code. Yes, Peter showed this slide on the keynote, but I would like to again stop on it. With the time being, more and more things are going to the browser. In the Web Components project, we are trying to stick as much as we can to the proposals that are currently out there to go in the browsers for rendering, for styling with CSS shadow roots, and so on. In the past, back in 2014 and before that, there were really no tools for module systems. There was no CSS variables, so every company built their proprietary theming, as we actually have such in UI5. But now it's time for evolution. It's time to renovize all of this and implement it in the framework.
Okay, so what are UI5 Web Components then? And Martin already explained what are the Web Components standards are. So our UI5 Web Components are based on those standard API, and they are the new offering of SAP to provide set of reusable elements with enterprise qualities that our customers and partners need to achieve consistency of their UI. Let's take a look at this small example. It's very simple. It has a title button and list with list items. But the same snippet can be also written in this way. Can you notice the difference? We just added a couple of one prefix. It's the UI5 dash, and with the same markup, but there is a quite different result. So on the left side, you get the default appearance, and on the right side, it's a completely Fiori tree experience. And because our presentations is actually in the browser, they're the real web components, and Martin can press it. So you don't get only the appearance, you get the behavior, the keyboard handling, theming, accessibility, and so on, features that we'll talk later. So don't forget that it's just an HTML. So you can take our tags, UI5 title, list, and so on, and can use it everywhere that you use to write your HTML. You can add attributes like style, class, ID to customize it. If you want to interact with them, we also provide events like this nice, my favorite web component, the date picker. If you want to listen for changes in the date, you can add event listener using the change event. And yeah, if you change event, the callback is called, and using only the native add event listener method. So with our components, aggregating your markup or different web components inside other web components is also possible, similar to the UI5 Classic. But here, the slot attribute is the important one. We have UI5 panel that consists of header and content part. So if I want to put in the header 2 UI5 buttons, I just use the slot equals header. And the rest is for the content as it's the default slot. And let's see the result. This is the panel header. The buttons are at the side. And if we expand the panel now, you can see that the rest is for the content, like a default slot. And on the next slide, as you learned with our UI5 Web Components, you get visualization and behavior. But it's hidden for the consumer. They only touch our tag. Beyond that, we have written HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But they're all hidden behind a convenient API, like attributes, properties that everyone can change. And the result is immediately will be rendered. So to recap, the web components are a way to share fundamental UI5 qualities with others. Also, easier consumption as we try to re-implement the UI5 classic controls as UI5 web components. For example, the SAP end button, if you know it, and our UI5 button, they look completely the same in terms of design, behavior. And also it's designed for a small footprint because it's not full-fledged framework like UI5 Classic. UI5 Classic provides programming model, data binding, and so on, many stuff. So also we're targeting web developers that need the flexibility to use HTML tags when they have their own programming model, front-end framework, and so on.
Talking for frameworks out there, of course, for our UI5 Web Components, we have the enterprise standards we are following also in the Open UI5 code base. And I'll start with something super important. I guess all of your companies, they have their own flavor, their own styling, their own branding. So the most important thing for a product is the branding. And the branding comes with the theming. And of course, in the UI5 Web Components, as well as in the Open UI5, we are supporting theming configuration. We are currently supporting 3 themes, and they can be set in multiple ways. One of them is using global configuration. For example, in this way, you can set the theme for all of the web components you have on your page to high contrast black. We have an option to set it to Belize theme, which is Fiori 2.0, and the Fiori 3 theme, which is actually a default. So your application might look like this, or like this. The same amount of code, you just change a single configuration. So of course, we are also able to do dynamic switch of the theme, and we use a little bit different approach from UI5. As you can see in our demo, you just call a single method, which is setTheme, and it is like an API from our base project. It's exported from this module, and just a single line of code, and you have a dynamic switch for your application. It just works. Super cool, right? But how is it done? We completely reworked the theming. We, in the beginning, borrowed from UI5, and all of our theming is based on CSS custom properties or CSS variables. So all of our markup for the controls, which is encapsulated in every shadow DOM, is completely static. We don't change nothing when we change the theme. It's like completely static page. You have 0 changes. Only one thing is changing. Now Ilhan will do the demo for it. If we go back to the presentation, we will do a little bit dangerous thing. Just the button, because this is actually changing because we changed the state.
Okay.
Okay. If we check this button, it's and we change the theme. Nothing to Belize and HCB. Nothing in the button is changed. Just one thing is changed in the header of the page. If you open the head tag, there is one style sheet which is called Data UI5 Web Components Theme Properties below. Yes, and it contains definitions for all of our variables.
Below. It is. Oh,
okay.
It's here.
And it contains definitions for our variables, so we are just exchanging this tag, this content, and everything is themed. So let's move on. Of course, if someone starts to use our components, it's always the first question is, can I add something custom? Because everyone has his needs, so there is always a need to customize something. As this is just a DOM, you can write a normal style attribute to your components. I mean, it's just HTML. You can style it by adding style or class and do some modifications, such as changing the width, height, the color, the background color, the active color, and so on and so on. So it's super simple. We also have mechanism for changing just parts of our complex composite controls, such as the card. On the next slide, we have an example for this. You can see that on the top right angle of the card, we have this thing which we call status. And we had a feature request that some of our stakeholders wanted to make it bigger, make it red, make it based on some status from the backend. So we are also exposing this API for our composite component. So we are quite flexible, and you can change almost anything without knowing the underneath classes and styles and the HTML structure of the component. You can of course also use the CSS variables, which we use for theming, and change something as global configuration or for a single component.
Okay. In SAP, we really invest in improving our accessibility. What the accessibility includes, actually. Martin already showed you the high contours black theme. It consists of mainly the black and the white colors, because it helps people that has some vision, impaired vision, to distinguish more easily our web components and the UI. But it also includes keyboard handling and focus handling to help you go through the components using only the keyboard, because it's often faster for everyone. And of course, it also includes screen reader support. Our official statement is that we support JAWS 2018, this screen reader support platform for screen reading, and running on Chrome. But we try to cover as much as platforms we can, like we are testing VoiceOver on macOS, for example. We prepared a demonstration for our keyboard handling here. We have a set of web components, but all our web components come with built-in keyboard handling. We have a tab container, checkbox, button, date picker, and 2 cards. So now Martin will use only the keyboard, if you trust him. So he pressed the tab, and the focus goes immediately to the selected tab. Then he can use the arrow keys, left and right, for example, to change the focus. And if you want to change the selection, he can use the Enter or Space key. Now if he again do tab, he's going to the Overview button. And if you press Enter, the overview is opened, and he can move again through the list and enter and select a tab. Now if you go with tab again to the checkbox, the checkbox has keyboard handling. Again with enter, he can change the status of the checkbox. And because the button in the middle is a disabled one, it will be skipped with tab. And my favorite web component, the date picker, has the focus now. And the date picker actually has pretty advanced keyboard handling. It can be opened via option and arrow up options, arrow down, F4, and a couple of more combinations. But most important, the most important thing is that when you open the date picker, the focus is on the today's date, or if there's a selected date, on the selected date. And if you keep pressing tab or arrow keys, you will never leave this popover. So it's pretty amazing. If you hit a couple of times tab, you're going to the mount view. Please go to the mount view. Select something with enter. That's now a day. Enter.
Okay.
And you selected the date. So now press the tab key. I don't know if you can see, but the third list item is a bluish one because it's the selected. And the focus went to this particular item, not a random one, because it should be the first, right? It's also focusable. But the list has advanced keyboard handling. Whenever you enter the list, you're going to the selected item if such exists. And then you can use the arrow keys and again change the selection. And it's for all our components. Of course, there are many other enterprise qualities like translations. We have components that have built-in texts and they have to be translated, right? So we provide that option with global configuration, similar to the theming, but now the key is language. For this page, we set the language to German, because the DE key is for German. And let's inspect the date picker, open the mount view of the date picker. You can see that the mount names are translated, like März, for example. And did you know about this cool feature actually? Can you type how it's in German today? Today? Heute? But how it's written?
Heute?
Like this? No German? Okay, press enter.
Okay.
Oh, it's very cool, right? Can you say for
after
Morgen?
20
Please
weeks.
try tomorrow first. Please try tomorrow.
It's
how it's
Morgen?
Morgen, okay.
Oops.
Without dash.
Okay.
Super cool, right? But this is too simple. Let's try something more random, like in 2 weeks or in 55 weeks, please.
Someone tell me a number, like
55. Let's 55.
33.
It's Wochen or it's Wochen.
Like this?
Like, yes.
Okay, so
It's amazing. Yeah. Now let's go to the text area. And the text area has a character counter at the right. It's already translated. It's 5 Zeichen verbleibend, which should mean 5 letters remaining. So if Martin starts typing and exceed that one, the text changed to 3 Zeichen über limit. Yeah, we are over the limit. Yeah. Okay, it's pretty cool stuff. Let's go ahead. We have also right to left support. You might know that we have a direction attribute in the HTML, and using direction equals RTL makes the browsers flipping as much as he can the content. So if you put something from, you use the left 0, it will move the div to right 0. But in our designs, not all the left and right paddings are symmetric, so we need such support, and it's also available through global configuration. So if you use it, your application may look like this. All the cards, all the list items are right aligned, but what is most valuable, space, is that the language is, the RTL is language driven. Because, as you might know, there are languages that are naturally right to left, and Hebrew is such an example. And again, the date picker, as you can see, the icon was at the right in the previous examples. Now it's on the left. And because the language is Hebrew, all the months and weekdays are translated.
Unfortunately, we don't know how it's today in Hebrew, but
If
believe us,
someone
it works.
knows how it's in Hebrew, we can test it. It should work.
Yeah, we should also mention that the configuration for the right to left is also based on the locale as well as the language. If you don't define your own language,
it will be derived by the
browser. It will be derived from your browser locale, as we do in OpenUI5 actually and SAP UI5. So yes, some of the features are working based on your localization as well.
It's your turn. You're talking too much.
Okay. Let's quickly. I would like to quickly show you the high-level architecture of this whole story, because you see just web components in the end, but let's a little bit deep dive in this. Hope we have time. So we are exporting through. We are exposing all of our sources through npm, and they are available through ES6 imports and ES6 modules. We can consume them, but you should use some kind of CDM, such as package.com, or have your own build tooling, such as Webpack. It's not your own build tooling, or you should just choose any build tooling we have out. So, but the sugar we put, these tags, there's much more behind this. We have a base class, which is called UI5 element, which is like the control class we have in UI5, and it gives our controls all of the definitions and so on. We derive from there, such as defining properties and so on. I have an example now for a button class. It inherits the UI5 element, and the UI5 element, as you saw in the first example, inherits from the HTML element. The example looks like this. We have a static method which make the definition of the component, definition of properties, events, and slots for the element. This means that if you need some properties, you put them in the metadata, similar to what you do in OpenUI5. If you want some styles inside the shadow root, so you can have your component styled, you put them in the styles static getter. If you want a render, render here stands for, in the UI5 Web Components, we decided not to couple to like a concrete technology for rendering. So we made our components as much as abstract as we can. So you can plug any rendering engine inside the component and have it rendered with this. We are currently using lit.html for all of our components, as we consider it as quite small and super fast library for rendering DOM at all, and it serves perfect our needs. But if you would like to use something else, you can do it, and we are not coupled with any technology, so we can exchange it always in the future. Even if there is a browser API, there is such proposal, we are just waiting for its approval. If there is browser API for updating a piece of DOM, we can just get rid of this code, and you know the best code is removed code. We also have the template, which defines the DOM structure, the DOM beneath the web component, and maybe it's better to give an example in a moment. Of course, we have the life cycle hooks similar to what we have in OpenUI5, such as before rendering, after rendering, and two more methods which define when the web component is placed in the DOM and when it's removed. The rendering for our web components start with handlebars. As I show you on one of the first slides, we are tackling with handlebars since 3 years, and we are successfully using them for our renderers. So I have prepared an example of a simple, actually it's almost the actual renderer for the button. Yeah, it just defines the button tag and UI5 icon, if there is such, defined as property, and a spanse. It's super expressive, it's super simple. You just define your static attributes like type, and you have mustache statements for the dynamic part. And if the button is disabled, this disabled will be equal to true. Super easy. So, but this, the handlebars works with strings. So we are parsing these handlebars to lit-HTML renderer, which looks quite similar, right? It's like it just changes the curly brackets with, and it uses string template literals. So we are doing this transformation, but it's like optional for you. You can, as I said, you can do any templating you want. So, and then we have the class, we have the renderer. We have this in placed in your DOM, like in your application, and the result in the Chrome inspector will look like this. We have the button, we have the shadow root, which I explained. This hides the functionality from us, and it has all the structure hidden from the end user. And on the screen, we get this. Our presentation is HTML, so it can render anything. So in order to get familiar with our components, you can go in our playground. Also, show it. Do we have time to show it? Okay, we have.
I think we show it on the keynote, but
okay, we have a lot of examples there. Also, the keyboard handling is mentioned there, and so on and so on. But on top of the playground, we also have these three nice built applications, one with React, one with Angular, and one with Vue. There are to-do apps. I showed you last year a simple one. It was similar to this, but it's uglier, let's say. This one is styled with the latest Fiori 3 specs, and it can serve you well if you want to just get started and play around with the web components. Okay. Also, we built the Fiori 3 app. We showed on the keynote.
No, it's not for the keynote. It's the application that we will build on the hands-on later.
Also, we are doing this beautiful application today. So I would like to invite you to our hands-on. So it's written in React.js. There is no reason we picked React. The reason is that we are more familiar with React than the other frameworks out there. So we will be building this. You will get in touch with the web components. Feel welcome.
Okay. And there was one thing that we are really proud of. After we what?
Yeah.
Okay, two things. Yeah. After we released our first beta version, it was in February this year.
11th on my birthday.
11. Yeah, everything is for him. So after we released our first beta version, we get a lot of positive feedback in general. In GitHub, in all kind of Slack channels. Twitter is, I think, the most famous one. And can you show it the blog? So we were mentioned in a very popular technical blog, and 9 web components UI libraries you should know in 2019. And there are 9 libraries. We are at 7th place, but I can tell you that all the 9 libraries are frameworks for web components that are a long time around. And we were just in 2 months in age here. So it's really, really great and motivated us to continue working on it. We actually couldn't gather for a photo because we have so much work with our team for the thank you slide. So it was really amazing. So please keep giving your feedback. It's valuable for us. We want to build something special here. And I want to share with you our next steps, our future steps. Okay, for the February, we have beta. Today, we announced our release candidate 1, and of course, everyone is expecting the public release, right? So we need you to do it.
So it's time for you to give your feedback, write issues, chat in Slack channels. We are like we are answering in GitHub issues for like 5 minutes after it's open. Some of you can't confirm this.
Even when we drive, we also respond with one hand.
We want to build something good. Please give your feedback.
And the topics that we will focus in future are around the teaming. We have the built-in teams, right? They're pretty good, but we are working with the Fiori designer, with the team designer, sorry, to enable fully custom teaming that you used to with UI5 Classic. The team designer in future will provide us the CSS variables that we need to override, so the customer or the consumer, that the consumer changed. And also expect new components. We already have requests for file uploader. We have requests to enhance some of our components, for example, the table. And also, we want to make public our base class, the UI5 element, to enable you to write your own web components. And we also have a POC to enable server-side rendering, which also looks good. So I think in the next UI5con, maybe we'll start with these topics then.
Yeah, I believe us. It works.
And we have no issues.
And that's it.
That's it.